everyone. Welcome to episode 5 of Empire Soccer Report. James Birle, and I'm joined by
Anthony Merced of AJMSportsFC.
Anthony. Thank you so much for coming on. We had a busy week of Red Bulls news in terms of players coming in, players going out, and I think, eventful
press conference with Michael Bradley, Dylan Nealis, and Ronald Donkor.
But first and foremost, Anthony, how you doing, man?
Doing good. You're right, it is a busy week, not just for Red Bull, but also NYCFC, players in, players out. It's actually better than some years because there have been years where we've just been waiting and waiting and nothing happened. So at least there's some news this year.
Certainly, and quite a bit of news. I mean,
a whole lot of turnover within the teams, and talking today with Dylan Nealis.
Apparent that he is only one of 3 players who was in the MLS Cup Final 11 from 2024 that is with the club, the other 2 being Cameron Harper and Emil Forsberg. And
just a few weeks of preseason remaining, but Julian de Guzman staying busy.
Center back Noah Eile is on the outs. He will be headed to reunite with an old friend of ours, Anthony and Gerhard Struber, at
Bristol City. It looked also for a minute like he was going to join Danish Superliga side
FC Nordsjælland, but it's time to get sexy again, as Gerhard would often say, in Bristol. So I guess we'll start the show there. I mean, it's a
big loss for the Red Bulls ahead of 2026. Noah Eile's been
an important player on the back line for the past 2 seasons, and really a player who grew into his own as one of the best ball-playing center backs in MLS at the time. And so your first thoughts, Anthony, on the Red Bulls losing Eile for 2026?
Yeah, a few things. You're right. It is going to be a big loss, especially as Michael Bradley is looking to put a team together that plays better with the ball at its feet. We saw a little bit of that under Sandro Schwartz, but it wasn't really kind of taking shape. Whenever things got bad, they always went back to the chaotic kind of style that got them where they've been in recent years. So it is interesting to see that, and I know that Dylan Nealis spoke about essentially learning how to play center back in the expectation that Noah won't be there. So it stinks. It is one of the cases, though. Red Bull has always been a team that's like, if you don't want to be here, you can go. Now you can't just go for nothing. And some of the rumors of this price tag, are pretty good, especially considering it's a championship team that's behind them.
Well, the package is reportedly between 4.2, 4.3 million, which is a significant
return on investment for the player, and it's kind of what a U22
initiative signing is meant to be. You bring in a young player, you develop them, you sell them for more than you got them. It would be, I believe, 4 times the amount that they spent to bring him in. That's significant cash, and it's cash that they used most likely to bring in their newest signing, which is Jorge Ruvalcaba from Pumas, the 24-year-old
Mexican international winger. As he was born in California, he will not occupy
a international roster spot, which is significant, but he will occupy the 3rd and final DP spot for the Red Bulls ahead of 2026. But important to note that
the club will have the ability to buy down that contract as a TAM deal.
I think this is a good player to complement the opposite side of the wing where Cade Cowell plays, another Mexican-American individual. I like to do their damage in behind. Speedy wingers, crafty, twitchy guys that could complement the strong and sturdy and good finishing ability of
Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting. And the Red Bulls announced
that signing the morning of us recording. It'll be a day ago for the people watching this and listening to this, but Michael Bradley spoke very highly
of Ruvalcaba and what he has the ability to do to help this team
in the attack. And fans were calling for that 3rd DP spot, and rightfully so, and it's going to be filled for 2026 with Ruvalcaba. I think he's an exciting player. Anthony, your thoughts on Ruvalcaba coming in and being the 3rd piece to this attacking front 3?
Yeah, I mean, it is a big piece. One of the things we've seen in years past is European guys coming in. They're mid-season. It takes a while for them to get adjusted, or they get tired because they have to play through when would be their off season. This is a guy coming from Pumas. He is a California native. I keep referring to him as a Mexican international because he's been called up by the Mexican national team. But born in California, he knows how to play CONCACAF football. I mean, you don't play for Pumas for as many games or as many years as he does without knowing that. He scored against Vancouver, I believe, in the in the Leagues Cup. So it's a plug right in. Same thing with Cade Cowell. These guys this is a big shift. The other thing that's really important to note, everybody's focusing on the defense. The truth is, Red Bull allowed, I believe it was like 3 or 4 less goals than in 2024 last year. it was a significant drop of almost 10 goals from an offensive side of the ball. So being able to bring in these guys, and obviously last year was due to injuries, Cam Harper was out, but now you're looking at a possibility where Cam Harper being a super sub off the bench, as opposed to going to a Serge Goma or Mohamed Sofo, where now you've got this buffer essentially where you can rest players and you got guys who can get significant minutes. So this is about as good as you can ask for. And again, like you mentioned, next year this guy could be a TAM player and they can open up a DP spot and get somebody if they really want to.
The thought of going from 2025 where you start a match with Carmona, then going to you have Cade Cowell, you have Jorge Ruvalcaba starting, and then you can go to Sofo off the bench. You have Harper off the bench, Mosquera, Rojas. I mean, it is a massive, massive increase, and I understand why people are focusing on the defense because it still feels like it's somewhat incomplete there. The attack is more or less complete. They might still have some work to do in terms of bringing players into the midfield and certainly at the defense, but mention that because absolutely an improvement on where the squad was last year. Yes, hard to say goodbye to a player like Lewis Morgan, but the best the best ability is availability, and beating that trope into the ground. Mentioning that there, but it's certainly an exciting
Transition period for the club right now, Anthony.
Yeah, look, like you mentioned about Lewis Morgan, the truth is that the guy just couldn't stay on the field. And when he was on the field, he was tremendously effective. There was a 2023 year, didn't play at all. Was just, there was wonder if he would ever come back. And then he had that 2024 year where he did miss a little bit of time here or there, but he was tremendous for the club. And the year started and Sandro Schwartz was down him, and then Cam Harper goes down. It was just a line of guys getting injured. And so bringing in guys who are a little bit younger, guys who have a little more experience, who are looking to really prove themselves to take that next step. This is a perfect scenario for everyone involved, including Michael Bradley, who's got a lot to prove from a coaching standpoint. One thing I asked a question about in the meeting is everybody's super comfortable with him. Like obviously some players were playing with him for Red Bull too, but he seems to really know the locker room, MLS guy. He knows what each and every one of those guys is going to go through. So it's an exciting time for some of those attackers, and I don't think you could have a better guy in charge for the turnover of this team.
And that was a topic of discussion today at the press conference with Ronald Donkor, who is admittedly a shy guy. That people on Zoom didn't get to hear it. I was lucky enough to be in the room interviewing him. And once the recording stopped and he walked away, he was like, "I'm a little shy, guys." It was a great moment. I loved getting the few opportunities we do get to talk to Donkor. I've always been great. But his main message in just about every question he was asked was he was very impressed with the connect between the group, and he felt that was translating on the pitch. He talked about the sharpness, the chemistry that he's been establishing in the midfield with guys like Forsberg and Berggren, and of course we all know he has a great relationship with his fellow countrymate Mohamed Sofo. But his way of speaking about Michael Bradley was very, very clear that this is a different approach. It's a different style of manager that he's not worked with in his career, to the sense that he gets the players. And it was also brought up that might have something to do with his age and proximity to the players. He's not so far removed from his playing days himself, only retiring a couple seasons ago. And this is a big name in U.S. for sure. One who has had his imprint on the team already, it seems. So that's something that folks can really be excited about. Again, really his first time having a preseason as a head coach with any team, because he took over, of course, midseason with Red Bulls too. And of course, as you mentioned, a lot of players that he's familiar with when they jump into the first team. But as far as integrating those two groups together, it seems like, at least from Donkor's perspective, and Dylan Nealis mentioned it as well, that there is quite a bit of work that has been impressive from the coach staff. And we'll see how well it translates when the games start to matter. But in their last two preseason games, things have seemed to go pretty positively in matches behind closed doors, and they'll finish out their preseason in Texas for the epic Torneo de Tejas. I mean, Anthony, you know better than anybody. The Red Bulls love a preseason tournament. You think we're going to get a repeat of the 2011 Emirates Cup here? Because it's be shaping up for something that spectacular. Who knows?
I don't even think they won a game in that tournament. I think they just drew two games. I think the Arsenal game was like a 1-1 draw or 0-0 draw or something like that.
Look,
That's the most Red Bull thing to do, right?
Metro. That's pretty metro. Just to put.
Yeah.
Um, as for what Dylan Nealis was saying at the presser, um, obviously we asked him about what his role is going to look like moving forward. It's been very clear that the team is thin at back position. Noah Aila's departure only emphasizes that even more. Right now, there's only two natural center backs in the team. Tim Parker, who congratulations to him and his wife, just welcomed a newborn into the family. He did not feature in the most recent preseason match. And then Robbie Volader, who is the newest free agent signing on the back line. Dylan Nealis has played exclusively as a center back in preseason, just who's the new right back that's going to be competing with Nealis for time on the right side, also capable of playing center back. He played there. And then Michael Bradley also mentioned that Matty Dos Santos, the 17-year-old left back from Connecticut, who academy is with Red Bulls too, played a little bit of center back, as well as Raheem Edwards. That's four different fullbacks who have played in the center of the defense. And again, they may still be looking for new players to bolster the role, but for Dylan Nealis, it seems like he's making that jump. He's back usually in a back three in that 2024 season where they made the run to MLS Cup final. But it looks like he's going to be slotted into that role pretty permanently. At least that's kind of the we've been gleaning from preseason matches and from his speech today. I'm curious what you think about Nealis making that transition, perhaps full time to the center back role. I think he's more suited for it than some other fullbacks would be, but it's certainly going to be interesting. I don't know if many fans will feel that's very promising for the back line.
I don't think it's the end of the world. Dylan's a lot of things. Incredibly speedy is not one of them. And I think when you think about those wingbacks for Red Bull, they really want them to get forward. They want them to be on the ball more. The one thing about Dylan is that he can really help control the middle of the field. He was coming in more a lot last season and playing at times like that third center back. So I think it's a natural progression. It is going to be interesting on that right side. They're going to flip Edwards over to the right. There's also Omar Valencia. There's all kinds of Dennis Youngar. Like it's going to be really interesting to see where they go. I think this is the make or break year for Dennis Youngar. This is 2 years in. He's been kind of all over the place. Sometimes he is well liked, sometimes he isn't by the coaching staff. So he's really got to prove himself this year. And if that right back position is it, look, he's got the speed. He does have some ability with the ball at his feet, but he needs to be consistent going into this year.
When you think of the way that Red Bull 2 used their fullbacks last year, is they had those guys just bomb forward regularly, whether it was Ofori or Dos Santos on the left or Mina played on the right, and even Yengor featured with Red Bull 2 on the right on a few occasions. The expectation there is that those guys are going to be very heavily involved in the attack. They're going to need to be very mobile in getting forward. When you think about the guys that are going to be playing in front of them on the wings, Cowell and Ruvalcaba, those guys are going to be stretching the back line as far back as possible, and that's going to give a lot of space to those fullbacks. So I think Yengor, for as underwhelming as he's been in his previous two seasons, probably fits that role a little bit better than he would as a traditional winger in years past. So I think, a lot of folks kind of penciled him in as a player that Red Bull were going to be looking to move on from ahead of 2026. I think, especially when you look at the thinness in the center of defense, Yengor becomes a player that can be at least a depth piece at the fullback position. And then, the curious case of Juan Mina, what's his role going to be? He could be another player that fills in there. It looked for a while like he was just going to be on the outskirts club forever, but he's one that now has a potential role as a depth fullback, and we can see him somehow, some way feature into the first team when it looked like it was a foregone conclusion that he'd never do that. So I think it's going to leave some question marks as we go into the season. Perhaps by the summer window, they'll have a clear idea there. But one name that has been brought up as a potential incoming signing to play some center back is Diogo Bagüí, this young Ecuadorian from Emelec. He was linked with a bunch of clubs over the last few weeks. It looked like he was going to go to Tijuana and Liga MX. Looked like he maybe going to go to LA Galaxy. There was apparently an unnamed Italian club that was interested in him, and even some other clubs around Ecuador, including the big guns like Barcelona SC and Liga de Quito. So he had options there, and it was confirmed by Joe Pantorno of AM New York that there is interest for Bagüí. Not a done deal by any means, but not a player that we know a whole lot about, but certainly one that could grow into a starting role with a top MLS team. He's considered one of the premier young defenders coming out of Ecuador, a country that had really made a huge jump on the international level in terms of their first team and youth teams in general. So, and there have been players who have come from the Ecuadorian league and found success in Major League Soccer. Recent Jose Cifuentes, I think, is the first one that pops to mind, the midfielder at LAFC. So again, we'll see if there's any noise about Bagüí being a genuine target for New York. At least he's on their radar. And I think that's a signing that would make sense in terms of a player that can grow into the role. But as of now, it looks like the starting center backs for in an important match would include Tim Parker, Dylan Nealis, or Volodare. Could we see potentially a player like Bagüí join Red Bull and be an impact player, in your opinion?
Not in 2026. I think, 20 years old, and we've seen so many players like this come in, and the first place they go is with the reserve team. And that's kind of the grinder, right? Like, can you make it down there? And if you can't, there's a lot of players who come from other countries. Heck, there's a lot of players that come out of college. They used to come out of the MLS Super Draft that felt like they were destined for the first team, and then it just didn't happen. They could not survive the grinder that is third division soccer in the United States. So I see him getting a lot. He'd have to impress tremendously in Red Bull too. He might sit on the bench. He might play, and I don't think the Red Bulls are playing the Open Cup this year, or are they? I can't
They are.
remember if they are. They are. So I could see him getting minutes there, but if it's like 3 games in a week, maybe. But even then, I think they would probably convert another player like a Raheem Edwards or something into a role if injuries were an issue.
And if it is to be a Red Bulls 2 signing, they have the international spots now. They've been loading up, making trades. I believe they have as many as 12 at the moment. I think they've acquired at least 5 this offseason. The Red Bulls first team, excuse me, acquired an additional 2. They entered the offseason with 14 international players, so they are over the threshold there, but there are creative ways in which that they can get down to that with loans to Red Bull 2 or players who are off the squad. And I mean, if Noah Eile, as we expect, is moved on from that, lowers the number as well. So those continue to be moving pieces. And again, we won't know that until the day before the season when teams have to be roster compliant. And again, it's a moving part. One player that we didn't mention, we know is we knew for a while was headed to Red Bull New York, but that's the new goalkeeper, Ethan Horvath, who is a personal favorite of mine as a U.S. national team fan. I'll never forget where I was watching that penalty against Mexico in 2021 in the Nations League final. He's a player I followed since he was first called in to the national team with the U.S. team at the 2016 Copa America under Jurgen Klinsmann, where he was, kind of anointed the young goalkeeper of the future for the national team. And it hasn't exactly gone that way. He's been in and around camps and is going to be looking to get back into the national team ahead of the World Cup. You look at the Eastern Zone, you've got Matt Freese, Patrick Schulte, Roman Celentano. Potentially now, Ethan Horvath can work his way back into a national team conversation. And that's not to mention, you also got Dane St. Clair, the Canadian starting goalkeeper.
And Matt Turner.
And Crepeau is on Orlando as well. So you've got a Canadian battle of the number 1 and 2 goalkeepers with their rivals. I mean, it's an exciting Matt Turner in New England. You've got a great collection of goalkeepers, and that's just in the East. I think it makes for a really exciting little rivalry coming up. I think Horvath is certainly above the level of solid MLS goalkeeper. I think he's going to be a fan favorite, honestly, for Red Bulls fans. I think he'll come in and do the job that Carlos Cornell did, and perhaps even better. And he also played alongside Michael Bradley at one point in their careers. So that's an interesting dynamic there. I know he mentioned to Christian Arnold in the New York Post that dynamic and how change, but people don't really. An interesting story and an interesting storyline to follow for the season coming up. But I think they're going to have a good backstop in 2026 and for years moving forward in Horvath. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on bringing in the U.S. national team goalkeeper, Ethan Horvath?
Yeah, well, this was something that about a month ago when we were sitting with Julian de Guzman, it was mentioned of like something's coming, something's coming. He was one of the names that I had heard about. Although they're pretty good these days of keeping essentially they'll throw you like five names and then like one of them will be the right one. That's kind of like what happened in the Timo Werner saga. But the truth is they needed a veteran in that position. They needed somebody who was going to they could have gone into next season and said, we're going with a rookie. I mean, they did that and it turned out well when Luis Robles ended up being, not that he was a rookie, but like very unproven when they gave him the starting spot. So now you've got Horvath, lots of experience, European experience there. You've got somebody in almost every level of the team structure that has some kind of European or international experience. So it's going to be really interesting to see this is a dramatically different kind of Red Bull team. We've had years where it's just like they're just babies running out there going crazy. And now you've got a veteran striker, you've got a veteran captain number 10. Now and yeah, we didn't even talk about that with him where he doesn't need to run around anymore. He could because he's got Cade Cowell and Jorge running around. And now you're looking at the goalkeeper position. Like I don't think you could have made a better decision unless you somehow managed to talk NYCFC into trading Matt Freese over.
Oh, Matt Freese has got that huge contract that's going to keep him. What 2030 is it? 5-year
So,
contract?
yeah, he's going to be there for a while unless somebody comes knocking from Europe and he wants to go. But the other thing too about that, Horvath, Turner, Stefan, and we're seeing it now, and that's all goalkeepers. But even with guys like Josh Sargent, right? We're seeing that there was this big push, like everybody's got to go to Europe. They've got to go to Europe. They don't have to go to Europe. They need to play games. And if they're not playing games, competitive games, then you see how quickly they fall off. That's what happened when Stefan went to Man City. I knew he was gonna smell the starting position. Same thing with Matt Turner. He went to Arsenal. It's just like okay, and then he got loaned everywhere, and it was just a fight to get on, and had nothing to do with any of their abilities. But they fell off of that first choice from European managers for no reason other than the fact that like their teams just wouldn't even play them.
Well, to your point on Horvath, he's certainly a goalkeeper who was capable of playing in a high level in the Champions League One. He's kind of past the point where he could be a reliable, cup keeper for a Premier League team. He won't be a number two in the Prem. I think, Zach Steffen is past that point as well, and they kind of fall in the same career path where they come to MLS. But if I'm Ethan Horvath and my goal is to get back into the national team, and I know he's not said that as his major stated goal, but of course it's on his mind. It's on every professional's mind. He was at the 2022 World Cup for the U.S. If you look at all the other goalkeepers in contention for the U.S. national team job, where are they? They're in New England, they're in New York City, they're in Columbus, they're in Cincinnati. So I think it makes for opportunity fell into his lap, and it's one where he can be a number one for a team that's we'll see how well they can test for trophies and for a playoff spot and goals, but it gives him a job security that he didn't really have most recently in Europe with Sheffield and with Cardiff, where he was very clearly not in the plans of the manager. So that makes for a good position for him to be in ahead of the World Cup. Do I think he'll get into the World Cup team? I don't know. I think it's going to be an uphill battle for him just because he hasn't been called in almost 2 years now. But if he has a fantastic first half of the season and is rivaling the other American goalkeepers in the league as one of the top, I think he should at least get a call up in one of the windows prior to the World Cup, and we'll see how he does. So again, Ethan Horvath, that's an exciting signing for Red Bulls fans, not just because of what he did in that CONCACAF Nations League final, but because he more than has the ability to be a top keeper in this league. And I'm going to talk about another departing player because we mentioned it on last week's pod with Luca Richmond of RBNY Experience. Shout out to him. But finalizing the move away from the club was Marcelo Morales in a return loan to his prior Universidad de Chile. And it's one that had a lot of noise throughout the winter, but then it looked like it wasn't going to happen. And then it ramped back up again. And then what do you know? He's back to his previous club. And it's actually not that shocking when you think back to what his 2025 looked like. Couldn't deal with fitness and couldn't break into MLS fully. He was only somewhat integrated to the MLS Next Pro team and clearly was somewhat homesick with the amount of times that he was posting on Instagram about his previous club, and clearly this is the right move for him. I don't believe is I don't I'm not remembering correctly. Is there an option to buy on his return to Chile? Either way,
Don't
it
believe so,
feels
but
like
they could probably figure it out if he really wanted to stay.
it feels like it would take a lot for him to go back to Chile and then later return to New York, one way or the other. So I think that makes for an interesting dynamic. It leaves the left backs for between Omar Valencia and Raheem Edwards, which was more or less where they were last year, where at the beginning of the season it was Valencia who flew out of the gates with 5 assists and really looked like he cemented his position. But then through the summer, it became Edwards' job. And Edwards, maybe the more defensive choice between the two players, and Valencia, a player that was often would be get targeted because he's bombing on the pitch and was a little green in that respect. But I think he's got the higher ceiling of the two. He's certainly younger. He could get in and around the Panamanian national team, Valencia, and Edwards he's not going to get called into Canada when they've got several left backs ahead of him. One Alphonso Davies plays his position. To be perfectly honest, I don't think Edwards is going to be called him. So
Never heard of that Davies kid.
that's how they run. If moving forward, if that's how they run with the left backs, Matty Dos Santos was very impressive for Red Bulls too. I don't think he's going to get a first team contract in 2026, but as far as a player that could provide cover, I think he's one to watch out for the future. Yeah, but what's your thoughts on Morales losing out on him? A player that we didn't really get to see much of at the MLS level, but clearly a talent player that could have been something of a game changer.
Yeah, we've seen this a lot with like if you follow the reserve team, you do see this a lot. And it's not just with this team, it's with any team. When you're a kid and you come to a completely different country, there's the culture shock, there's the fact that you're all alone. Red Bull does do a really good job of trying to integrate into the team culture as best they can. But sometimes it's just, you like you said, you get homesick. If it affects the way that you play and you just want to go back. Sometimes there's also an agent in your ear telling you like, hey, I can get you back home and then we can move you on from there. We've seen that on a few occasions as well. So, there's a lot of talent there. There were moments where it really showed, and then there were other moments where you just saw a distracted player. And so, wish them all the best, but that's the grinder of Red Bull too, to see if they can they can make MLS players out of them.
I think it's an interesting ordeal with Morales because it was a player that I know so many people were excited about in a position where you go from having one of the best young bright spots in John Tolkien for the past few years, and you get the heir apparent in Morales. That's big shoes to fill in MLS terms for sure. And then you just don't get to see a whole lot of him. He goes back, and you're absolutely right about the homesickness. And it's the first time that this has happened. It's to be expected, right? These are young men making a big career change, big life change, and it just doesn't always pan out. It's a little unfortunate for the fans, but at least now they've got a player in it who's got a year's experience in the league in Valencia. You've got a seasoned veteran in Raheem Edwards, and is it the highest top end talent of fullbacks in Major League Soccer? Certainly not, but the upside with Valencia is certainly high, and the floor you get from Edwards is certainly serviceable. We saw that at the end of last season. Could certainly be better, though, and we'll see if and how they make any changes to the fullback for 2026. We spent a lot of time.
Yeah, there's also a name, and I don't know anything, so this goes all over the place. Whatever. I'm just going by what this player said. David Raum at Leipzig during the winter break was asked about, and he's a left back, was asked about playing in MLS, and he said, "Oh yeah, I'm definitely probably going to end up there at some point." So if you don't know who this guy is, he has been the captain at times for RB Leipzig, who is now I think third and pushing into second in the league that Bayern Munich always wins. But the truth is, a player like that is waiting in the wings now. He will have to be a designated player. That's the level player that he is. I don't know if we want to put a DP spot on a defender, which is very difficult to do. But the truth is, that's why they have the ability to buy down Jorge and maybe use that second that third DP spot for somebody like a David Raum who could really make a big difference. I'm not saying it's going to happen, this summer coming, but when the shift happens and MLS is on that quote unquote big four European calendar, that is a transition that's a lot easier to do than it would be, in the normal MLS calendar.
And on the idea of designated players, because he certainly would be. I mean, his market value's got to be over 20 million. At the end of 2026, Emil Forsberg and Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting, if their contract options are not picked up for 2027, that is two open for Red Bull New York. So we think that this offseason's been a big factory reset. 2026 into 2027 could be even bigger. And then, of course, you mentioned the calendar change and how that's going to affect things. That's the sprint season in the spring of 2027, which, I mean, that's going to be a whole new world. I put out a tweet that, of course, the Red Bulls are going to win that, and it's going to forever taint their first MLS Cup. But knowing that maybe they won't even win that. But that's just me joking around. David Raum,
Are they going to call it MLS Cup? Like, is it going to be?
They said they're giving it like the real season. That they're going to give out a trophy. They're gonna do the whole thing. I don't know if they can. They should probably give it like the MLS is back treatment, where they just like they say like it's its own thing one time. I think people would take it a little bit more seriously if they did that. But I think just the way the calendar lines up, they kind of have to crown a champion in some form or other. But David Raum, I mean, that would be a very welcome left back signing. I'm talking about an improvement at that position. It would take a whole lot of work to get that done, and they just unfortunately don't have that for 2026. Down the line, it's a real possibility that I would encourage folks to keep their eye on. It's an exciting one too. But that's
and I don't want to see on Twitter Anthony and James said David Raum is coming. That's not what we're saying. He did an interview and he said he'd be interested in coming to MLS. That's it.
Well, look, and this is why we're in this business, because we enjoy talking about people talking about things, you know?
Exactly.
So not to put the cart before the horse here, but we are speculating as speculators do. That's just about all the player news that's surrounding the club right now. Of course, a few different things. Leandro Cau from Brazil on the radar for RB2. We'll see if that materializes into anything. Like I mentioned, Red Bull 2 has the international space, but we're going to see what moving forward with this squad. Certainly going to be some players coming in, moving out. I don't think they're entirely done at this moment. And then the season is, under 3 weeks away. So they've got 3 more preseason in Texas. They're going to take on Atlanta United, FC Dallas, and the Houston Dynamo. We'll see how those things go. We'll find out if those matches can actually be watched, because I believe at least the matches in Dallas can be attended by FC season ticket holders, which is a little bit more promising in terms of folks who want to watch those matches than just having games behind closed doors in Florida or at the Red Bulls training facility. So our eye on that. But I guess let's do a little bit of speculating, just because I said speculating like 300 times a minute ago. Let's do some predictions. I mean, we've got a close enough picture of what it's going to look like in a few weeks' time. Pretty close to the starting 11, at least. This team under Michael Bradley, are they playoff bound in 2026?
It would be, considering the talent that's on this team, a wild under-delivery. It would be an epic collapse if they don't, at the very least, make the playoffs. I think they're good enough to be 4 or 5. You think about the last few years, there's so many games that were borderline, that the ball falls left or right, and this is the 3rd place team, but then they end up being the 8th seed. And so I think that they've filled some of those gaps this year, where they don't have to worry so much. But again, injuries are everything. We didn't even talk about, there's not really much of a backup striker. So if Eric Choupo-Moting goes down, then we're having a whole different discussion. So, but if he's there, which he was very sturdy last year, you're talking double-digit goals. I mean, I feel really good about their chances, not just to make the playoffs, but to make a serious run once again.
I'm glad you mentioned that about Choupo-Moting, because I mean that sent a little down my spine, and I'm sure many others who are listening or watching. But you think back to last year, ahead of Choupo-Moting signing, nobody anticipated him to play as many minutes as he did, and he was excellent. I mean, he's scored 17 goals. Many of them did come from the penalty spot, but you want people to score penalties too, so those count just the same. Paper, I think Ruvalcaba, Cowell, Choupo-Moting. That's what you want. You have a big, strong presence at striker who you know has great finishing ability. That's carried him throughout his career in Europe. And then you've got the speedy wingers, the technical players, excuse me, that can get in behind, can force crosses in, and open up space for that type of player. But once that player it becomes unavailable, do the wheels fall in somewhat? I agree in your assessment that this squad is now certainly talented enough, at least at the top end, to be a playoff team. My only worry is the same worry I would have had last year, is that I thought on paper the Red Bulls should have been a team, but injuries got in the way of that. And you look around the rest of the league, you think, wow, all of these teams improved dramatically. Um, you saw that the threshold for point into the playoffs. The Red Bulls had more or less the same amount of points they did in 2024 when they were MLS Cup finalists, but that no longer was enough to sneak into the playoffs. And that can no longer be the mentality, Anthony, is that you just need points to sneak in, because that's not going to do it anymore. It's just not going to cut it. You have to be a good team throughout the 34 regular season matches to even have a chance to go on that historic run they did in 2024. So I certainly agree with you in that assessment. If you could give me a place in which to finish, like a target, I feel seventh place, sixth place. I can't see them any higher than fifth. I don't think they're a top four team just because of how loaded some of these Eastern Conference sides are. I don't know. Do you share the same assessment that they're around sixth place at their best?
I say fifth, and if the only reason why I say four is that you never know. You get some lucky wins down the line, and you can eke out some of those points. I feel like NYCFC did that a little bit last year to get a little bit higher than they really were in the standings. I think if I were Michael Bradley, I'd be disappointed with seventh. I would be okay with fifth. I'd be happy with fifth. I'd be okay with sixth. So I think that level is probably going to be where they are for this year. But I don't think they're going to be happy with that.
No, no. And because I have you here and you do a great work covering NYCFC as well, certainly you have more eyes on them than I do. Todd Donovan has come in and had a very busy offseason. Pascal Jensen punched above his weight with their run to the Eastern Conference Final last year. They're an exciting team in their own right too, and I love that for the rivalry, for what that could mean for the city. Of course, their stadium's on the horizon for 2027. When your rival's good, that's a good thing too. Our iron sharpens iron. What would you say is the ceiling table for New York City? Because
Yeah.
see them only just slightly ahead of the Red Bulls, probably around the fourth, fifth, sixth mark in the table. I'm curious if you share that assessment.
Yeah, so I'm a little scared because there's spots on that team that they have not filled yet. And that's the striker position. Alonso Martinez unfortunately went down, kind of
Yep.
similar-ish to Ricky Puig, who's actually not even going to play this year, I think. So I don't know if Alonso is going to come back. If he's not, I know that they're looking at a striker. I believe his name is Musa. They are looking at maybe even putting Thomas Magno back in that position. I believe he was playing in 9 in preseason, which is wild to me because 2 seasons ago they were like leave and never come back, and now here he is potentially playing for a job. The other thing is, losing Justin Hack. I know that there's some fans who are not crazy about him. That kid filled any hole that came. Keaton Park's long-term injury, he's playing in the central defensive midfield position. Thiago Martins needed games off. He's playing at center back. So losing him, especially the way that they did, because he actually turned down a bigger contract to go prove himself with the LA Galaxy, of all teams, the LA Galaxy. I think they need to fill in some gaps. They need to really show and prove early on that losing these guys isn't going to be a big loss.
And like they're really in a similar position to the Red Bulls right now in terms of where their roster's at, in terms of, they don't bring in a new head coach, but they do bring in a new executive in Donovan, who's I think done pretty good work so far. The Talis Magno thing is wild to me as well, because he was nearly banished a couple seasons ago, and now he could start on the wing for them at front in the absence of Martinez. I know they have that rumored signing of that guy from Schalke up front, whose name I'm blanking on right now, but that could be a formidable striker duo when Martinez is back and healthy. One of the best American forwards and one of the best in MLS last year. I think it's going to be an exciting season for New York soccer. So appreciate the peek behind the curtain onto the other side of the hub. I know you do great work covering them for AJM Sports FC. That's all the time we have for episode 5 of Empire Soccer Report. Anthony, let folks know where you can find them at AJM Sports FC.
Yeah, thank you so much again. AJMSportsFC.com. Same thing on Twitter and Blue Sky. Look for us there. Got great stuff. Gary Redmond, a contributor there. Photos by Matt Kremkow is one of the best. People don't know Matt Kremkow's name, but that guy has been shooting the New York Red Bulls since, I believe, 2013. So like
Wow.
one of the best like just archives that we have out there. And hopefully, we had to pull back a little from Gotham last year just because there's not enough bodies to cover so many games. Hopefully we're gonna hop back in and be able to include Gotham again this year. We do love the girls at Sports Illustrated, so hopefully it'll be a good year for them as well.
And yeah, shout out Gotham FC. 3 trophies in 3 seasons. CONCACAF, Kings, the NWSL 2025, NWSL 2023. How could you not want to keep your eyes on what is one of the best, I would say, for my money, the best women's soccer team that's not in Europe? I don't think that could even be a discussion. And I think they would challenge some of those top European teams if they ever had those matches in high-stakes scenarios. So again, thank you, Anthony, for coming on. Always a great pleasure talking with you, such a knowledgeable figure about New York soccer. And thank you, everybody, listening to Empire Soccer Report, Episode 5. This has been an exciting week ahead of some more preseason action, just under 3 weeks away from the MLS season kicking off. Thanks again.